Greetings and blessings to all of our viewers and listeners from Yerushalayim. The point of departure of the shir today, which is entitled Bilam's Two-Tiered Final Solution. Of course, when we hear the words final solution, so we're overcome with terror because we associate it with the Nazis, Yimach Shemom, and Hitler, Harosha, who tried to annihilate, destroy the entire Klal Yisrael. However, it was Bilam that originated the idea on a two-tiered level to bring about the final solution and the total annihilation of Klal Yisrael. And had it not been for Pinchas' courageous and heroic act of somehow subduing the anger of the Kadosh Baruch Hu that blazed forth, and at least 170,000 people were killed either by the plague or by Bezdin and Adim. So it would have been the annihilation of Klal Yisrael, and that the pasuk tells us emphatically. There's no question about it. The pasuk says, "Pinchas ben Elazar hakohen heshiv es chamosim al bnei Yisrael." And if it wouldn't be for the zealous avenging of Pinchas, who courageously, very heroically killed Zimri, so Kadosh Baruch Hu proclaims without any reservation, I would have destroyed the children of Israel because of my jealousy. So we see that Klal Yisrael was on the verge of total destruction, and as the pasuk says beforehand, Vayeshiv Yisrael Bashitim Vayechol Liznos as B'nai Moav, and when the Jewish people settled in Shittim, so the people began. We don't know exactly how many people began, but there was no question, it was a multitude of people that began to commit harlotry with the daughters of Moav, and of course the daughters of Midian also joined in. A multitude of Jewish people in Shittim also concomitantly were over Avodah Zarah. Like the Chazal tell us, the provocation and the seduction of Bnei Moav first and foremost included idolatry, and only after a Jewish person would serve the idol would Bnei Moav submit to harlotry. Amazing, amazing, amazing. We really don't understand too much about it. What do we see here? We see over here that even though we're talking about the new generation, the old generation, in the course of the 40 years that the Jewish people were in the desert, died out. Of course, that was because of the Chet HaMeraglim. So 40 years in a very slow process, anybody above 20 died as a oynesh, as a punishment for the Chet HaMeraglim. However, the younger generation, and the young generation was under 20 years old when this Chet HaMeraglim was committed, so they were saved. They were not Bechlal any Gezeres, and they were basically educated by Moshe Rabbeinu. And Moshe Rabbeinu's basic education, like the Rambam explains, what did Moshe Rabbeinu try to inculcate on the Jewish people? That the very, very purpose of Matan Torah, of the revelation, that perhaps they were adolescents at the time, perhaps they did not grow to maturity during the time of the revelation, but there's no question about it, they were also there. Most of them were there. And the purpose of the revelation was to give the Jewish people a modus vivendi, a way of living. There was a mutual understanding, and there was an arrangement and a juridic agreement between Klal Yisrael and HaKadosh Baruch Hu to surrender and submit to a certain type of moral life. And of course, like the Ramban tells us, when we recite the blessings over the Torah in the morning, Birchas HaTorah, so the bracha Vasher Kimshon mitzvahs of last week by Torah is a Birchas HaMitzvah, just like the mitzvah of lulav or tefillin or tzitzis requires a Birchas HaMitzvah before we undertake to do the mitzvah. So likewise, the last week, the Divrei Torah is a Birchas HaMitzvah, no different than sitting in the sukkah putting on tefillin. However, the other bracha that we say, the second bracha that we say, Shebach Rabbanim Mikol Am, V'nasa Lanu Es Torah, God granted us the Torah. So this is a Birchas Eidot. This is thanksgiving and gratitude. Says the Ramban that we express to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, because he did not charge Bnei Yisrael. He did not challenge them with the goal to discover the will of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, but rather Kadosh Baruch Hu revealed to man a set moral system. And of course, the reason is, like the Rambam says in Meir Nevuchim, Chelek Beis, Perek Chof Aleph, that it's doubtful whether man could discover all the halachas by himself. And even there are certain mitzvahs, certain commands perhaps he would have discovered, nevertheless, the ramifications of these mitzvahs, no question, he could not discover. And all of the halachas, makes no difference what they are, but all of the mitzvahs, all the halachas of Taryag mitzvahs are connected to morality and ethicism. If you shech the behema, so the reason Kadosh Baruch Hu wanted us to slaughter an animal before we eat it with the tzarfesh abrius, it's catharsis. Asher kitshonu b'mitzvah. That's what we say before we say a Birchas HaMitzvah. He granted us a sanctity. He raised us above a beastly level to an angelic spiritual level through doing the mitzvahs. So all the mitzvahs basically precipitated the individual holiness and morality. That was the purpose of a Kadosh Baruch Hu's will that was communicated to man through the apocalyptic experience of Matan Torah, and no halacha, no mitzvah is devoid of the ethical motives. There is an ethical motive, say the Chazal, even in mitzvahs like Shechita, etc., that ultimately the purpose that it pursues is to elevate the Jewish people to be great spiritual beings. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu has confided this to us, that we should be a Mamleches Koyanim V'Goy Kodosh. That's the purpose of all of Torah, that we should live Kimei HaShamayim Al Haaretz, just like Kimei HaShamayim is spiritual, so we should raise ourselves to great spiritual heights. Of course, it's not so easy, and if somebody were to become a very ethical, moral being, and it came easy to him, so there's no great accomplishment. The great accomplishment is that we are always going to be confronted. Historically, as a community and as an individual Jew, we shall always be confronted with great difficulties. There's forces that are working against us, always dynamic forces within and without, that the purpose of these types of trials and tribulations is to bring the Jewish people to great spiritual heights by overcoming the difficulties, by overcoming all of the obstacles and impediments. This is the purpose of Matan Torah, like the Rambam says, as we mentioned a moment ago. And if somebody, says the Rambam, in these difficult times, when all of the forces are against us from within and without, so if we could honestly and sincerely overcome these obstacles, even though it involves great struggle and sacrifice. So we have reached great ethical levels, true greatness. Jewish people were educated with these principles. And they also said every morning, Berachas HaTorah, yet by Shittim, something totally inexplicable took place. We cannot understand it. All of a sudden, all of the authority of the Torah, which the Jewish people had surrendered to the authority of the Torah, was instantly, all the self-discipline, all the self-denial that the Torah requires of the individual insofar as morality is concerned. So all of a sudden, the Jewish people manifested a hatred of this discipline. Whether the discipline should be imposed from above, it was a transcendental discipline. Matan Torah was min hashamayim. Nevertheless, the Jewish people, a multitude of the Jewish people, sought freedom from any normative system interfering with the human desire for carnal pleasure, even if a prerequisite was to serve idols, something which we cannot understand. And they reached the lowest level possible, that there was no authority, not this worldly or Moshe Rabbeinu, or this worldly authority, or any transcendental authority they held is allowed to legislate to us how we should enjoy life. We want to squeeze out every possible enjoyment, physical, carnal enjoyment, and there will be absolutely no authority that will stop us. This is exactly what happened by Shittim. And of course, the question naturally arises, how did Klal Yisrael succumb? Rashi tells us, Yeshiv Yisrael Bashittim V'Echel Listeners says, B'nei Moav Al Yidei Atzas Bilam. Bilam knew, Eloheim Shalevu, God of the Jewish people, Soinei Zima, hates, despises immorality. And if they should succumb to immorality, they'll surrender to seeking carnal pleasure, so Kadosh Baruch Hu will destroy them. There was no question about it. That was Bilam's Eitzim. That's not our question. The question is, how did Klal Yisrael respond almost enthusiastically, with total consent, as it were, to the seduction and provocation of Bnei Moav? They were on very, very high moral, ethical levels, something which is extremely difficult to understand. And basically speaking, we don't understand it that well. We would need the Chazal to explain it to us, and indeed Chazal did explain it to us. The Medrash Rabbah in Parshas Dvarim asks this question, and it brings down a pasuk in Mishlei. Moichiach Odom achechein yimotzei mimachlik loshon. Pasuk in Mishlei, the literal translation is, he who rebukes man, person will reproach somebody for doing something wrong, shall in the end find more favor by this individual or community, as it may be, than he who flatters with a very, very soft speech. Who does this refer to? So the Chazal tell us that Mashiach Odom Achechen Yimotzei refers to Moshe Rabbeinu. The Gamotzosa Chen Beinai, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu writes that the Jewish people at the end, after all the times that Moshe reproached them, Moshe found favor in their eyes. They appreciated it. They understood that Moshe Rabbeinu and all of Dvarim, all of Sefer Dvarim, which we shall start reading soon, is one long reproach of Moshe Rabbeinu that Klal Yisrael appreciated. And Moshe Rabbeinu found favor in the eyes of Klal Yisrael because they knew that it was ultimately for their benefit. Who was the comparison to? Comparatively speaking, we say that Moshe Rabbeinu was more popular. He found much more chen at the end of the day for his rebuke and reproach. Beinei Kol Yisrael mimachlik lashon refers to Bilam. Shehechlik v'nevuosav v'gova libam v'nafla bashitim. He spoke very flatteringly of Klal Yisrael, smooth words. And what did that produce insofar as the feeling of Klal Yisrael is concerned? Their hearts grew haughty. They became conceited and they sinned at Shittim. So the Eitz Yosef says an unbelievable thing. What did Bilam say? Dvarim Mesukanim. He praised the Jewish people. He said, Mateivu alecha Yankiv mishkenesecha Yisrael, how goodly are thy tents, Yankiv. And Bilam interpreted that pasuk that he said, that praise, that flattery that he bestowed upon Klal Yisrael, just like the Chazal tell us, she'ein peschei bechuvonim zeh keneged zeh, ve'ein chalonoseihem bechuvonim zeh keneged zeh. In other words, the Jewish people not only had moral modesty, where we understand it, tznius, in their dress, in their thought process. They did not think of any type of lustful machshavos, yeruri avera, like the Chazal say. They were pure. They'd undergone a purification in the 40 years they were there in the Midbar. There was a total catharsis, and they were modest in their actions, modest in their thought process, to the extent that they were not even concerned. They had no curiosity of what's going on by a neighbor. So they made sure that they had no ability, no capacity, no capability even of looking in to their neighbor's house to see what he is doing, how he's behaving. There's no curiosity whatsoever. So Bilam praised them. And because of Bilam's praise, Klal Yisrael took it to heart, and for some strange reason, they became haughty, conceited, vainglory, and when that happens, there's no other possibility. It's perforce, they will sin. And why is that? So the Eitz Yosef explains it very, very short, very, very briefly, and the Baron Cutler elaborated on it. But we're not going to go through the entire danger of somebody falling in to what we call gaiver. But the Baron Cutler brings down the Medrash as well, and the Eitz Yosef, and he added a question that the Mefarshim brought down, but he placed it in a proper perspective that we see the sharpness of the question. Chazal tell us in Yalkut, Seif Parshas Emor, what was one of the reasons, one of the elements that Klal Yisrael were Zoicha? They merited freedom from Mitzrayim after 210 years. There was a salvation, there was a redemption, but they needed certain elements of morality and ethicism in order to merit the salvation. One of them was there was morality. In 210 years, the Chazal tell us there was one act of immorality, no more than that. And it's absolutely remarkable, like the Baron points out, that we're all aware of the dynamic force of osmosis. The Rambam says, Hilchas Deis Perek Vav, that a person is influenced by his environment. Environmental influences, if there'll be evil, the environment is an evil environment, so it will produce evil people. The Rambam himself says, like in our days where we're surrounded with Rishayim, with evil people, so we must escape to the Midbar. That's what the Rambam says. That is the dynamic force of what we call the Lashon HaKodesh, a sviva of an environment. And that's why the Jewish people always made sure that they lived in a very religious environment, because they had lived in a secular environment, so they would be secularized. It's almost a psik ratio. And of course, we know what the Chaim Brisker said when he read that Rambam. So he fainted. He said, who does the Rambam address? It can't be somebody like me. The Rambam tells us, halacha l'maaseh, if you're in an evil environment, just like our community here in Cairo, we're surrounded by evil people, this will influence us, this will impact us, and we will also become evil unless we become fugitives and run away to a desert. And it brings down the pasuk, Yeshev Bodod, a person should sit in isolation, v'yidon, and not talk. Who's he speaking to? Who's he addressing? Asked Reb Chaim. He can't be addressing somebody like me, because if I were to undertake the advice of the Rambam, or the Chazon Ish learned it's a halacha. Hilchas Deis said the Chazon Ish is halachadik as Hilchas Shabbos. By the Chazon Ish there was no difference. The Rambam is kuloi halacha from Bereshis bara Aleinu Kol Yisrael. Everything in the Rambam is halacha l'maaseh. So if the Rambam says you have to escape to the midbar, so that's halacha. So Reb Chaim said it can't be speaking to me, because if he's addressing me, if I would do that, I would become insane if I would have nobody to speak to and learning. So who is the Rambam addressing himself to? To the greatest man of all, Adam Gadol Shebanokim, a giant among giants. And the Rambam taught us that even if he would be a giant, a spiritual giant, if he remains in an evil environment, he will be harmed morally. And yet, the Jewish people, where the Torah itself says, Eidos, says, clear as the day, Ervas haaretz, it is a immoral land. Belamid, Shemitzrayim mekulkeles mikol haarotzos. It's the most immoral of all places. There's no place on earth, no location that comes to the immorality that has seeped into Mitzrayim. The Mitzrayim mikol kol mikol amim. The Mitzrayim are the worst immoral people. And yet the Jewish people for 210 years were the greatest generation in the history of moral people. They overcame miraculously trials and tribulations that defied the imagination, and we're just saying over the words, we cannot understand how the Jewish people, without a Torah, like the Chaim points out, there was no real Torah. They had a tradition reached such dizzying heights that even after Mount Torah, Klal Yisrael could not reach, and on the contrary, by Shittim, they fell to the lowest level of immorality. We do not understand it. Said the Baron Kotler, there's only one answer. That's the answer of the Chazal. This was a question by the Chazal, and they responded by saying it was due to the fact that the Jewish people allowed the praise and the flattery of Bilam to go to their heads. And once that happens and somebody becomes conceited. He becomes self-righteous. He becomes, as it were, somebody that is satisfied with his spiritual level. So self-righteousness, self-satisfaction, self-gratification leads to self-aggrandizement, vaingloriness, and right away there's degeneration and you fall. Said Baron Kotter, the Hageyo, mitzad chashivusay be'enei atzmai, his feeling of self-importance, and his self-importance expresses itself in narcissism. He now has self-love. He loves himself. And that leads to Ramas Ruach. He's superior to anyone else. He cannot in any way triumph and become victorious over a desire that will come to his heart. He can deny himself nothing because of his great self-importance and self-love. He cannot in any way break his will for carnal desire and pleasure of the moment. It's a moment, it's only momentarily. Cannot deny himself. And that's what the Chazal say. If a person is a Balgay, he cannot break his will, so we should know first a fact. If he has Gasus HaRuach, it went to his head, the praise of Bilam. This was Bilam's diabolical plan to destroy the Jewish people. All of his praise was only for one reason. Since he was a very smooth talker, he was a Navi, a master orator, so he knew also the way that we would penetrate, that Klal Yisrael would allow it to have ashpa on them, and they would allow themselves to become self-righteous and self-satisfied in spirituality. And that's what caused destruction of Klal Yisrael. That was one plan of Bilam. And we see over here how much a person has to worry about the danger of falling into a trap of gaiva. It's the worst of all traps, because if so, a person will have a feeling due to his spiritual madrega, so he'll have a feeling of entitlement. I'm entitled to this because I'm a VIP, I'm a very important person. I don't have to break my ratzon. And we see what the result is. It's tremendously good. And there was yet another element, as we said before, there was a two-tiered diabolical plan to bring about the final solution for Klal Yisrael. And we see something which is remarkable in Pshat. It says afterwards, after Pinchas, with his remarkable heroic act, save the Jewish people. So we have a pasuk that says that Moshe was instructed by Kadosh Baruch Hu, attack the Midyanim, and you destroy them totally. Because they are a source of grief and anguish to you. Because of their plot which they contrived against you in the incident of Pa'ar. And Cosby Bas Nosi Midyan. So of course the question naturally arises, we don't understand this. We would understand that the revenge that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to enact against Midyan for getting involved in a quarrel which has nothing to do to them. The quarrel was between Moav and Klal Yisrael, Bnei Yisrael and Moav. They were not party to this quarrel. Rashi says they got involved only because of their hatred of the Jewish people. They were not party to anything. They were not under any possible attack. They were not close, just like by Amol, they were not close to the Jewish people on the way to Eretz Israel, so there was absolutely no danger that the Jewish people imposed upon them. So we would have assumed that the reason for this mitzvah, the Goyim Nikmas B'nai Yisrael, take revenge, was for Atzas Bilam, that he motivated B'nai Yisrael to be mafka themselves totally, become beasts, act with any humanity whatsoever, lose their humanity, and that's why they have to be destroyed. But it doesn't say that. It said because of the plot, says Rashi, the machshava ra, the bad thought that they had, right, that they plotted against you. We're dealing with the Machna Torah. And the Chazal say the Machna Torah did not succumb to overwhelming, overpowering Yetzer Hara. When we have thousands and thousands and thousands of B'nai Smayov and Midian, in the ultimate form of seduction and provocation, and the Chazal are made, the Ruach Kodsham, that they didn't even have a Uri Aveira. And Bilam was aware that there was a segment of the Jewish people that very pious, big tzaddikim, and they will not succumb. But he had another plan to destroy them. And this is the reason why it's going to come B'nai Yisrael Meisa Midyanim, not because of the chaytim that were nichshal, that unfortunately the sinners had transgressed in an ugly manner, and Avodah Zarah, and Gilui Arayos, not because of that ugly event that HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded should be revenge enacted against them, but for the Machna HaTohor, because Bilam's plan was, like the Noam Elimelech says, that after such a devastating punishment that was exacted from the Jewish people, there was a Magefa, a plague, and also Bezdin, Alpiedin killed so many. It was capital punishment of over 100,000 people, and everybody saw this. It was a disaster that we can't even imagine. That people will speak about it, and they'll speak like the pasuk says, "Al dvar peor, al dvar kozbi, bas nesi midyon achoisom." They'll speak about immoral things. They'll speak about the activity that the Jewish people engaged in that caused this terrible destruction, this tragedy which we can't begin to fathom, and that will affect them too. So the Machna Tohor will also be affected. And the Riyah Kodesh told us, the great Riyah Kodesh told us that this is basically the Smichas HaParshias, because now we're going to learn Parshas Nidorim, Parshas Matos. So it's a very, very strange sequence that we have. We have Balak with Bilam's Eitzer of destruction of Klal Yisrael, and then afterwards we have the Kanoyas of Pinchas that saved Klal Yisrael. We have the mitzvah afterwards of the Kohen Nikmas B'nai Yisrael Beis HaMidyanim. As we explained, the Mechayev is to destroy Midyan, because Kozman Midyan is alive. So the Balei Kabbalah say they will have an effect on the Jewish people. They'll talk about B'nai Midyan, they'll talk about B'nai Ismail. They have to be totally destroyed to see that they're worthless. They have to now become utterly utterly destroyed, nothing should remain of them, and that somehow or other will be a mitigating factor, and even they discuss it, it will not have the debilitating, immoral effect that Bilam wants. That should be discussed. And even if you have to discuss it, but there's going to be a terrible, terrible high price that we're going to have to pay. And this is also a limud for us, that even though there's many educators that speak about the negative effects of media, etc., and they go into specifics, but they should know that perhaps it's the right thing to do. I'm not sure. But if they do decide to speak again about it, and there's impressionable young people that are there, so they should know they're paying a terrible price, because the thought process of just thinking about it, even though you're coming to negate it and nullify it, is a tremendous price that we will pay, because the impact is an immoral impact. And the Riyah Kodesh says that what is the central yisoid of Parshas Nidarim, when somebody takes an oath or a vow, lo yachel dvoroi kechol hayoytze mipiv yaseh. He should not profane his speech. Kechol hayoytze mipiv, everything that emanates from his mouth, yaseh, shall be done. So the Riyah Kodesh told Reb Chaim Vital two perushim. The first perush he said was Bal Yachel Dvaroi. Do not, like Chazal Darshan, don't make your words chulin. Don't profane your oath. Do not profane your vow. In the broader sense, don't speak anything which has to do to some sort of profanity. And if you're capable of not making your words chulin, in the broader sense, profane your words, then you're guaranteed, as the Riyah Kodesh, everything that will emanate from your mouth, Yaseh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will do. And all your petitions for Bonei Chayim Mizayne, for children, and for life and health and wealth, sustenance, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a guarantee of the Riyah Kodesh, will implement, will make it realized by you. All of your petitions, imploring HaKadosh Baruch Hu, will be fulfilled and realized. Like it says many times, Tzaddik Geizer HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mekayim, you became a tzaddik for that itself, that you did not speak unholy words, you spoke holy words, and for that itself, you're going to guarantee from the Riyah Kodesh, lifelong achrayas, you will be rewarded. The second parish, says the Riyah Kodesh, is Bayachad Varai, do not profane your words. Everything which emanates from your mouth, Yaseh, makes a chalois, has an effect. Everything. That comes out of your mouth, if it's for good, so it has a tremendous effect. It influences you in a good way, in a moral way. If, God forbid, it's bad, somehow or other, it's linked up with some sort of immorality, even if it's some description, right? Almost an innocent description. So it also makes a chalois, it also has an effect. Just like we know, halacha l'maaseh, if somebody makes a neder, he says, kikus asura, like a carbon, this piece of food is forbidden to me like a sacrifice, so it's a iser cheftza, there's a chalois, it took effect on the object, it became forbidden. Somebody takes a behemoth chulin, and he's magdish it, he consecrates to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so it became kodesh Lashem. Now it's in Beit Gazer Rachmana, it's in a precinct of a domain that belongs to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we see the koyach that this has. So this is the smichos haparashiyos, the tikkun for, and perhaps in the times of Shittim after the great tragedy, it was only natural for people to speak about those that were lost, their relatives, and of course they'll speak about the activity that they were engaged in. Even they would say that it is disgusting. It is absolutely deplorable what they did. It's ugly. Nevertheless, that discussion itself will make the Machne Ator Tomei. So that was Bilam's two-tiered final solution. That even the Machne Ator will not be spiritual people. And he almost succeeded. Miraculously, people came to such madrigas that they didn't have the Ruri Avera, and the real outstanding noble generations of all time, angelic people. And the Riyah Kaddish told us, and Gavaltiki aside, we don't have that much time, but just say the continuity that we have a din. It's a din Torah by Ari Miklot. By Ari Miklot. It says, Tachan Lecha Derech, the roads that lead to Ari Miklot. So we have to widen those roads. They should have Tezayin Amma, the width of major highways and thoroughfares. And like Rashi says, you have signs with arrows that point how somebody that killed a Jew accidentally, if he undertakes to escape to one of these Ari Miklot, he's protected against the Goyal Adam, the relative that has a right to kill him. And we made it as easy as possible for him to get there. Directions, instructions, visual instructions as well. And of course, the Mefarshim understood that this din Torah is to make it easier for him to escape, that he should not have to encounter the Goyal Adam to kill him. But the Riyah Kaddish has a question. What is the question of the Riyah Kaddish? How come we don't have a Tachan Lecha Derech, a din like Tachan Lecha Derech, by Gimel Regalim? 3 times a year, the Jewish people have to go to Yerushalayim with Karbonis. You have Karbonis Achag, you have to bring sacrifices. Many even bring the animals from their home. So why don't we make it easier for them by making signs with arrows and wide thoroughfares, which will facilitate them coming to Yerushalayim? Why Dafka by Ari Miklot? Asked the Riyah Kaddish. So the Riyah Kaddish answered, that's not the reason, to make it easier for the Retzeach, the Shoigeg, the one who killed accidentally, to escape. No, not that. That's not the real reason. That is a reason, perhaps, but that's not the deeper reason. In Pnimiyas HaTorah, in the depth of Torah, says the Riyah Kaddish, that is not the real, genuine reason. The reason is that we don't want the Ritzeach, the Shoigeg, the one who murdered accidentally, unintentionally, to get confused and have to ask somebody. Because when the people heard that a Jew did not have the Siyata Dishmaya, the aid of heaven, to prevent him from killing another Jew, it was unintentional. But we never heard of a Jew killing another Jew, even if it's unintentional. Intentionally, chas v'shalom, but unintentionally. He was not protected by a divine power that we're all protected by, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu allowed him to unfortunately slay another Jew unintentionally. So this should produce a terror in those that hear. Oh, how is it possible? How can it happen? But if it happened by one, perhaps deep down, I also have to uproot a certain bad attribute that I have. Who knows if I might not do it? So this terror and fright, and it's unintelligible terror and fright. It's an instinctive terror and fright, says the Riyah Kaddish, overcame this person, will lead him to misaken himself, to improve himself. Improvement starts with the I. I have to improve myself. I don't have to worry about others. Improvement, Tchilas Dino, is the I, me. I have to take care of myself. But if he should meet this Ritzayah B'Shoigeg, and they should get into a dialogue, and they'll discuss it, and they'll start to explain, this is what happened. So that will totally destroy the impact which would have taken place had there not been any dialogue and they would not have spoken about the details. That was Yotzei L'Chulin. A very deep spiritual experience became totally cheapened and perhaps even eliminated, and perhaps as the Riyad Kodesh will even result in something detrimental, because a person will not only not improve himself, he won't even be shaken to the core. He won't shudder when it comes to hearing that a Jew can kill another Jew. But by Gimel Regalim, we don't want to make it easy to get to Yerushalayim. We're interested in people bringing karbonis. We're interested in people being goyla regel even without karbonis, to be confused. And we want them dafka to ask people close to Yerushalayim, or the people that know the proper way of reaching the goal of getting to Yerushalayim. What is the way to Yerushalayim? Then there'll be a dialogue. But what will the dialogue consist of? Yerushalayim, Beis Hamikdash, Karbonis, Riyah, the Fnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Liros, Kol Sefercha, Yireh Yeroyah, we're going to be seen by Kadosh Baruch Hu. We're going to a Makom Mashras Hashchina. And these Diburim are a proper introduction and preparation for the great mitzvah of Aliyah L'Regel. They speak Dvarim Shebekidusha, Dvarim Shebetayra, Karbonis, Hashras Hashchina, topics that revolve around the Beis Hamikdash. So this will have a tremendous positive impact. The Koyach HaDibur, the power of speech, will have a positive impact. And all the dialogues, and the more, the merrier. The more you should become confused, and the more you should ask for directions, will have a tremendous effect on him. And that's why there's no din of Tochen L'cha Haderech. And we're holding in the 3 weeks. We're very, very oblivious to what the Churban Beis Hamikdash consisted of. It's debris. 1900 years have gone by. We see that we can live without a Beis Hamikdash, but we have to realize that if we want the Beis Hamikdash, we want Mashiach Tzidkenu to come, so we have to grieve for the Beis Hamikdash. We have to realize how important it is to us. And like the Chazal tell us, anybody who grieves and mourns for the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, especially during these 3 weeks, which are designed that we should build up some sort of feeling for what it means to be without a Beis Hamikdash, what it means to be without a Mashiach Tzidkenu. If we can say Tikkun Chatzos, very good, halavai. Something which unfortunately doesn't exist just about today, but even without that, but if we're not going to do it, so the Chazal say we're not going to be Zeicha, right, B'simchasa, and it's Nechamos, we're not going to be consoled, we're not going to be part of the Gula. We will not be there. Says the Ritva on that Gemara in Tainas Daf Lamed, that even if somebody's a tzaddik, but if he doesn't realize how much the Beis Hamikdash or the loss of the Beis Hamikdash means to him, he can get by without it. He has Torah, he has mitzvahs, so he will not be there for the Beis Hamikdash. He will not be resurrected by Bayish Shlishi. But even somebody who was a Poshet Yid, not a Talmid Chacham, a simple Jew, but a simple Jew realizes the importance of the Beis Hamikdash, committing the ultimate Geula. And he says, "B'kavona v'sechazenu einenu, b'shuvcha l'tzei berachimim," 3 times a day. He implores HaKadosh Baruch Hu, "V'sechazenu einenu," I should see, will there be a restoration of the Shechina, the Beis Hamikdash, due to your great mercifulness and your compassion. So he will be there. How do we arouse our feelings insofar as what the loss, the devastating loss of the Beis Hamikdash is concerned? And we should want, and we should want to yearn, long for the Beis Hamikdash. There's only one way. That's what the Riyah Kodesh told us. A dialogue, monologue, talking about it in a sincere way. And that ultimately will arouse us, and that ultimately will bring about Bayish Lishi Bimheira V'Yomeinu. We should all be Zeicha V'Sefazena Ineinu B'Shuvcha L'Tzim B'Rachmet Ashros Hashchina Melech Mashiach and Binyan Bayish Lishi.